He's a right now God. When Jesus said right then, he didn't forget about it. And this official didn't go, well, what if he forgets? What if when I get back home he's still sick and he forgot to pray? Like we do. When we say, I'll pray for you tomorrow when you're at your doctor's appointment, and then tomorrow comes and we're like, oh, I forgot to pray. Jesus is a right now God that we can come to as a child. And when he says, it is done, okay, it's done. Like I said, kids have no concept of time, so if you don't do it now, it's like you don't do it. They don't want to hear maybe or tomorrow. That is an eternity to them. I want it now. Jesus says, be like that. Want it now. That was the exact time. And then in John 5, I kind of picture this scene like the TARDA bus stop downtown. Got all kinds of people hanging around. If you ever driven downtown, you know what I mean. Right, Janice? All these people laying around at the bus stop. And there's all these people. And there was this man that had been a cripple for 38 years. And at this pool, this healing pool, when the Spirit would stir the water, if you were the first one to jump in, you would be healed. And so, as Jesus arrived at the pool, he didn't say, hey, does anybody here want to be healed today? He looked at that man and said, do you want to be healed today? Because he's a personal God. And the man says, well, I can never get in the pool when it's stirred. I'm still wondering why he wasn't at the edge, waiting to tip in as soon as the water started to move. I don't understand that part of the story, but it's like, well, why would you have to like be carried in and dropped in? You know, obviously there must have been a perimeter you weren't allowed to be at. But I'm thinking I'd have been like, and if I happen to fall in too early, okay, my bad.
God would have said, take up your bed and walk.
That's right. So he's hanging out wherever he's hanging out. But this is interesting. He said, do you want to be healed today? Because we know that some people get comfortable in their junk. And even though they pray, they're double-minded. And they really don't want to let go of their junk. They don't really want healing because they really kind of only know who they are in their junk. And so he asked him, do you want to be healed today? And then, of course, he threw out the excuse, well, I can't get there. And I'll read you what Jesus said. Get up. Pick up your mat and walk. At once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. He didn't need the water stirred because Jesus was there. You don't need the water stirred. You don't have to be in a $50 prayer line. You don't have to have the local healing evangelist prophet come through town and run to the Seagate Center. He's not the only one who can answer your prayer. You don't need Bob or I or Anita or Robbie or anyone on the prayer team to pray for you. Jesus is a personal God, and he asks you this morning, do you want to be healed? And you don't have to stir the water. You need Jesus.
They're about to give the Pope sainthood because they say he did a miracle and healed them. They're waiting for him to heal them.
Right.
Right. Wait out of the way.
That's right. We don't have to wait. So Jesus asked this man, and he was healed. Now, he suffered for 38 years. He suffered for 38 years. What was the difference? If there was a subtitle today to Jesus is a right now God, it's what a difference a day makes. Yesterday he was crippled. Today he's free. What a difference a day makes. The only difference was he met Jesus. That's the difference. He's a right now God. Jesus healed him immediately right then. John 8. All the people were gathered around and Jesus was teaching. And in verse 3, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. Most of us know this story. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him, thinking he might want to break the law and not give her her right punishment. And as we talked about, Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. They kept questioning him. He straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." He never said, "Well, she can't be stoned." That was the law. He had yet not died and broke her free from the law yet. And everybody walked away. No one stoned her. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir." "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Now. Go now. Not after 6 years of counseling to understand why you're living this life. Not after you have cleaned up your life and figured out an action plan. Go now and leave your life of sin. Okay, I have released you from that. Jesus said, just go. I'm not going to condemn you. You're better than that. Through Christ, we can go now and leave our life of sin. Today can look different than yesterday. He's a right now God. He's a today God. Go now. What are we waiting for? He says, go now and leave your life of sin. She was never the same. She was never the same. She was such a follower of Christ. And then in John 9, there was a man. And it says a man, so he wasn't a child. He was a man. He had lived all his life blind. All his life blind. But what a difference a day makes. When you meet the on-time God, right now God, his disciples asked him, whose fault is this? His parents or his that he was born blind? What is this? That is the dumbest thing. How would a newborn be in sin? Was he kicking his mama too hard in the womb? So the Lord, struck him blind? That's not even an intelligent question. Does God punish your children for your sin? The result of our sin does get carried on. The result of sin and the sin caused upon us is ugly in this world. But who sinned that this boy would be blind? Dumb question. Jesus said, nobody. Again, he didn't take him to the temple. He didn't call all the high priests. He simply spit in some dirt and made mud and put it on his eyes. And he said, now go wash. Same kind of words. He made some mud with the saliva, put it on the man's eyes. Verse 7, chapter 9, go. Wash in the pool of Siloam. This means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. That day, he's a right now God. What's the difference between being blind all his life and today? Jesus. What a difference a day makes. People couldn't believe it. They didn't even recognize him because they'd always seen him with his eyes all crippled. They're like, that's not the man. Once they found out Jesus did it, people started to talk. The man had to go and wash his eyes off when Jesus told him. He acted on faith. He obeyed God by faith. See, if you don't have the faith to believe God, you're not going to act on what he tells you to do. And many of us have gone to the Lord in prayer, but we're afraid to act in faith on what he tells us to do to receive our miracle. That doesn't make miracles conditional and, oh, God might do it. No, God did it. Did you do it? Did you receive it? When he said, pick up your mat and walk, the guy could have stayed there as a cripple. This is the tricky part. Faith as a child. When you stand there, the classic example, when you stand there in the swimming pool, and it's their first time to jump in, and you say, jump in, Daddy's going to catch you, they believe you and they jump. Most of us, what do? If we wait too long to learn how to swim, we're not learning. We're like, you'll drop me. Yeah. Faith like a child. So when your heavenly Father says, do this, you do it because you believe him through faith. Faith like a child. Don't reason it out. Don't overanalyze it or intellectualize it. God is a God of right now. If he says this, it's this. And the man acted in faith. He washed his eyes and he could see. John is a good book of stories for us to see what Jesus did. In John chapter 11, his friend Lazarus was very sick. This was the brother of Mary and Martha, friends of Jesus. And he was friends with Lazarus. And this is funny because this just shows kind of how dumb we are as believers, as followers, as disciples. He goes back into town. The disciples were a little worried. He was heading back into the same town where they just tried to stone him. And in chapter 11, verse 8, "But Rabbi, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." They didn't get it. They thought he was really sleeping. And so like, well, you don't wake up a sick person when they're sleeping because their body is healing. And so they said, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead." Like they weren't getting it. He's like, "Okay, they're dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe, but let us go to him." So they're like, "Oh my gosh, Lord, if you had been there, he wouldn't have died." How many of us tell the Lord he made a mistake? How many times have you said, "Lord, you kind of look bad here"? I tried to tell the Lord he looked bad. It's going to make you look bad if you don't answer this prayer, because all those people in the room heard that prayer go out. They heard that promise go out. And I remember the year that there was this evangelist that come to our church, and he prayed over Bob and I, and he said, "This is the year that the seed of your family will be birthed." In other words, in our understanding, we thought we were going to have a baby, or at least be pregnant by the end of the year. It was 1992. And he spoke it. Now, he spoke the Word of God. But we, between hearing it and receiving it, put all of our little understanding into it. And that was at the beginning of the year. So in October of that year, when he was coming back, and I was no more pregnant than I was Italian.
Your son, you said you're on.
So in October, he's coming back. This was 9 months later. There was no baby. There was no pregnancy. There was nothing. And I literally told God, "God, you're going to look bad." Because in that church, all those people heard that word. And they trust this man's words of prophecy. And I am not pregnant. You better do something. Because obviously I'm not going to have a baby by the end of the year. It is October. You could at least be, making me pregnant. You're going to look bad, Lord. He said this was the year that the seed, something about the family. Now, he knew nothing about our desire to have children, this man. Nobody ever did when Bob and I were called up to prayer. And, "Hey, you two come here and the Lord put a circle around you," or "Come here and let me pray for you." They pray things. They didn't know why. We didn't know why. But if I had all those recorded, I'd be like, "Whoa, that is our life right there." So he had prayed over our family. He didn't know what was going on. It was also the year that we were adopting twins who died. So I was really mad at God. I'm like, "Oh, you are not keeping your word, Lord." Why? Because I put my understanding in it. And so in October, I told him, "You're going to look bad when this guy comes back. And the guy's going to feel bad when he comes back and looks at my belly, and it doesn't look any different than it did when he was here." And I felt bad for the guy. But I'll tell you how that turned out later.